Altbot Reginald here. This guide is not like other guides. In this video, I will walk you through the 3 core positions Ultron can play to maximize his value, and discuss what kind of team comps he likely works best in. Now, I have seen top-rated players say he is good, say he is bad, say they don't know yet. I've seen him described as needing to play like a DPS and a tank by players I respect. But as a sometimes top-ranking Mr. Fantastic main myself, I'm something of an expert on hybrid character gameplay in Marvel Rivals, and I think Ultron needs to be played like what he is, a hybrid duelist strategist. Ultron needs to fluidly move between the types of positions familiar to healers and the types of positioning common to DPS players, including more brawls and more off-angly postures. Position 1, Poke-a-Bloke. Ultron is a healer and should sometimes play like one. In this strategist first positioning, Ultron is going to backline with his healers and play either a vertical off angle or directly on the other support players. Because he has infinite range and limited fall off on his hit scan shots, he should be able to provide both healing and effective fire support from this position. This is, however, the weakest position to play Ultron from due to ranged fall off, but it does have advantages, especially in the early neutral game poke fight when feeling out the enemy before trying to make plays or when avoiding riskier positions due to identified threats. One notable upside about this position is that Ultron is an incredible anti-dive character, probably the best in the game when played with other competent support players. He has a push-button shielding application and a healing orb with a sizable radius that he and his other supports can all safely sit in, preventing divers from finding a weak target or pulling attention and then picking the alternative support when they are distracted. Patty Cakes is strong, but Ultron Bailout simply destroys one-shot combo breakpoints. Just play near your own orb, which will be on one of the healers to avoid making yourself a target while they do the work supporting your front line. Position 2, Buddy and Brawl. Ultron receives 30 heals per second from his own drone AoE when near a teammate who has it attached. This means that you can play slightly behind the tanks, but near them, and use them as physical cover or use other pieces of terrain as well to allow yourself the opportunity to play aggressively with your front line. Now, you don't generally want to literally force yourself into the fight because you have a gun, you don't need to melee them. But you can play riskier due to the significant effective HP boost you get when you have both your shield and your dash cooldown available and your drone's healing over time constantly working on you. Generally speaking, non-committal chip damage can be absorbed by you and erased, building your ult charge and wasting the enemy's time on junk damage. This can work and is advantageous, especially when pushing cart as a death ball or brawling on point. It is often and rather counterintuitively safer to be near your own drone, which is placed somewhere on your front line or midline in slightly exposed terrain, than it is to be hiding by yourself away from your drone where you cannot access that healing. You'll have to learn when you can do this and when you can't, because it will not always be the correct play. This also works well with another DPS. For example, if you want to off-angle with them, don't just toss the drone on them and go to sleep sniping from the back. That's low value. The drone gets more value by healing 2 people than 1. Go with your DPS in the buddy system and help them achieve overwhelming advantage. Just don't die. Position 3, Ultroff Angle. This is a DPS technique that you should be leveraging on Ultron. Keep in mind, you need to play within 40 meters and direct line of sight of your team, or your drone will eventually recall. About 5 seconds if out of line of sight, and 40 meters is your max range. But if you are taking mild off angles to provide distraction, pressure, or picks, and you do need to reach a little further to make that sick play and land the final blow, it can be situationally worth it to let that drone recall. There are tons of places where this can be safely done without losing your drone. Be bold though. Take 1v1s, win them. You are a hybrid character that is a DPS in part, so play like one. Keep in mind that Ultron has self-sustain in the same way that Bucky has self-sustain. Overshields on button press, 2 in fact. He also has the mobility, which does give him shielding, and he can use that to escape. These 2 things and his basic flight allow Ultron to fight as a DPS quite effectively, then retreat to a health pack, or his own drone, or to the healers to rejuvenate before another fight. Okay, so we have covered the 3 core play positions for Ultron, and we've discussed broadly how to maximize for his kit's advantages while doing so. We're going to look at team compositions next. However, real quickly, I'd like to say this one thing. Ultron is a hybrid DPS strategist. He doesn't have the best healing, but it's not horrible either. The key thing you have to know is if you are going to pick Ultron, and you are not effectively delivering DPS, then you are not getting real value on this character. You cannot just backline bot with this guy. You need to sometimes play like a DPS and get picks. If you can't do that, pick someone else. Okay, here are some propositional team compositions. I have a few basic thoughts about how Ultron could synergize with other heroes naturally based on the strengths and weaknesses of his kit. So for strengths, we have constant healing output distributed over shielding, on push button, and solid burst damage. For weaknesses, we have a somewhat long TTK and low healing output. Believe it or not, Ultron's actual time to kill is pretty close to Mr. Fantastic in small form, around 4 seconds. And that's pretty slow. The big advantage of Ultron is that he has a really strong burst beam, so he can pick people off if you're close enough to do the 2-shot. For this reason, you do kind of want to play a little more aggressively with Ultron than far away, but sometimes you need to understand what your risks are. For these reasons, comp 1 is the obvious comp everyone thinks of, which is the triple support comp with 2 tanks and solo DPS. Generally speaking, something like Loki and Luna for support ults add decent secondary damage out of those 2 characters, especially in the current patch where Luna can also 2-tap on headshot. However, in this role, Ultron is actually making up the damage gap for the missing DPS and providing additional healing. So this comp actually has some advantage over a typical 2-0 DPS comp if you need a little bit more sustain out of your team. An alternative comp is swapping out the Loki for a Mantis. This is hypothetical, but you will have less healing and weaker support ults, but you will have a powerful damage boost and decent damage on herself. So you could end up in a situation where you have notable damage highs to run over the enemy if your team is able to play aggressively, and you may be able to overpower their sustain if they're running a basic 2-2-2. I have seen this work. In either of these comps, you do really need to understand that you are a big part of your DPS on the team. You need to be able to play off angles and sync kills. I'd recommend Star-Lord or Punisher or Hela here, or even Iron Man as an additional DPS. Something that has good damage and consistent damage over the course of the game is going to be really important for you to play off of and sync final hits. If you're running Mantis, you generally want one of these DPS that can play off of Mantis's advantages as well. Comp 2. This is a 2-2-2 comp, with the second healer being Rocket. This works especially well if you can get and retain an Iron Man, but I've literally played without one and done okay. The trick is for your team to understand that they need to be playing more cautiously and meticulously around terrain. The weakness for this team comp is high enemy burst damage paired with high enemy aggression. If the enemy is aggressive and does good burst damage, they may be able to overpower you and run you down. But both Rocket and Ultron will absolutely outpace more typical supports in ult economy, so you can get an early game advantage and burn them down for a 1 team fight. Plus, this comp features a lot more firepower than a typical 2-2-2 if Ultron is DPSing well. This scoreboard is from the early tries of this comp on day 1 of release, and I think it says where the potential is. The sustain isn't that bad, but it is a weak spot, so for this reason, I think a possible way to make this really work is to pick DPS and tanks with built-in self-sustain. Don't go running Thing, but an Emma or a Magneto or a Strange or maybe Cap or even Thor with his self-gen shielding could work. Bucky has self-generating shielding and a solid health pool to rely on, which can buff his effective HP, especially when paired with the heal over time and the shield boost from Ultron. Other tankier DPS you could look at playing include Mr. Fantastic, Magic, and Iron Fist. I know these are not the meta this season, but it could work. Anyone who can give themselves some sustain so they can be healed underneath it or stack it with Ultron's shielding could make a big difference here in staying alive long enough to receive enough healing to return to good health, and that might be the play. It's worth looking into. Comp number 3. This is a 1-2-3 comp, and this, I think, isn't as crazy as it looks. My idea here, and I've seen it work in ranked, at least in some situations, is to leverage as many hybrid characters as will be useful to the team. You run a solid tank with good safety margins like Magneto, Emma, or Strange, but then you run a Mr. Fantastic as a pseudo off-tank / DPS, who can make aggressive plays thanks to the ubiquitous healing resources available just floating around. Ultron will be picking up finals for this duo, and the final DPS is free to off-angle and do whatever. Okay, so tips and tricks. Magneto is a known counterpick for Cloak and Dagger. Punisher can effectively kill through support ults with his ult reasonably reliably if he's a good shot. But the thing is, if Cloak ults and Mag ults, then Punisher or Cloak, or maybe both, are cooked because Ultron's going to eat that Punisher ult, huck that sucker really fast. However, I discovered a tech. If Ultron also ults, As I mentioned in this video, you can blow up a meatball so fast that there's no time to throw it. This could be a win condition kind of play, so I'm very interested to see if it catches any attention in ranked play. Speaking of Ultron's ult, this is not a DPS ult. You should try to heal your team with it first before eliminating enemies unless the timing is good. Yes, you can use this as a tempo ult to engage in aggression and get backline picks, but it's just as likely to get low value there if the enemy is able to corner it. So you need to be aware of that because it has a long windup on and a loud announcement. Healing your team before initiating against the enemy is often worth it in my experience. Ultron will rapidly die to Star-Lord or most DPS ults that can reach him even while he is in his ult, so it should be used cautiously and with typical rules for intelligent positioning. You are not invulnerable in this ult, you just have a little self-sustain. Check your ranges and sightlines. Do not be exposed with no way to reach cover. Be within LOS of your healers. You can use your ult against some DPS ults better than others, like Storm for example, but seriously, Punisher is going to shoot you down. Okay, that's all I've got. If you wanted a more typical guide for his abilities and utilities that's a bit more explanatory but still high quality, I actually really recommend Cool Guy's video on the subject he posted, I think, yesterday. He does his prep work and it shows, and I appreciate that. Warm regards,
Reginald.
I would like to take a moment to provide an extra special thank you to Joseph Davison for becoming my second Oathmaker level member. Your support means a lot to me, genuinely. Thank you so much. I would also like to say thank you to Miles Williams Lewis for being an Adept level member for 5 months now. Thank you so much. It really helps out the channel a lot. And also, to my surprise, Fluff and Zimisk3 for becoming Adept level members this month. That's a huge deal for me. Thank you so much. Also, just a special shout out to all of the members who are supporting my channel and to Vinny especially, who has made many of my members. Thank you, Vinny. Thank you to my members. You guys are awesome. If you would like a special shout out at the end of my video, you can join my channel by hitting the join button and becoming a member. Thank you everybody so much. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks for visiting and bye-bye.